The shonen manga industry is by every metric a dangerous field to be in. It's a cutthroat world where even a series full of promise can be axed at a moment's notice. Those that dare venture into this industry often end up overworked and underpaid, working tirelessly for a small chance at the holy grail known as serialization. But even once you finally step into the world of regularly serializing series, you'll have to contend with longer, more tenured mangaka who may not be willing to share the spotlight. This corner of the manga world is filled to the brim with underdogs, and so what better medium to capture all the intricacies of this industry than with shonen manga itself? Dragon and Chameleon is an ongoing series by Ryo Ishiyama about the fictional Gario Hanagami, the author of Dragonland, the most popular manga of all time. One day, Hanagami gets into an accident and is magically swapped with the body of one of his assistants. It just so happens that this assistant is a man by the name of Shinobu Miyami, who's a pro at copying the art styles of other manga artists. When Hanagami asks to try and switch them back, Miyami refuses, because he gets to live his life as the most prolific mangaka of their time. But instead of despairing or getting depressed, Hanagami takes this as an opportunity to literally challenge himself, by trying to create a new manga that will surpass his own former magnum opus. Dragon and Chameleon somehow has all of the trappings of a normal battle shonen. Different arcs of action where Hanagami has to overcome increasingly difficult challenges on his path to the top. A large rogues gallery of fellow famous mangaka who exist to serve as different antagonists that Hanagami has to surpass. And a comprehensive and in-depth power system based on the art skills of everyone in the cast, that allows for the simple act of drawing manga to have the same level of dynamism as a full-on action scene. And all the while, we're getting to explore the actual mechanics and workings of the shonen industry through a hyper-fictional lens. And that's the biggest thing that I think is remarkable about this series, aside from just the idea behind it. The manga comes up with so many unique and interesting ways to bridge the gap between the real world of the shonen industry and the fictional battle shonen flow of the manga. One of my favorite ways that Dragon and Chameleon does this is through its use of symbolism and analogy to capture certain technical aspects of drawing manga. A good example of this is when Hanagami has to hire assistants for his newly serializing series, Soaring Blue. In the real world of making manga, you need a set of assistants with diverse skills and abilities, so that they can compensate for each other's weaknesses and raise the overall quality of a series. And Dragon and Chameleon explores this concept in a really fun way, by framing the different skill sets that Hanagami is looking for as these hyper-dramatic fictional roles. For example, Hanagami calls one of the roles he wants to fill on his team a mechanic. And this may seem a bit too over the top. After all, Hanagami could have just said that he needed somebody with an understanding of digital art techniques. But by framing the job as something dramatic and drawing a metaphor between the hyper-technical work of digital art and some sci-fi mechanist, the idea comes across to the audience in a way that's not just more eye-catching, but more informative too. Even though this manga is a lot of fun, the techniques it uses means that the audience gets to learn a ton about the shonen industry as well, which is something I think is really incredible. It's not like the strategy is anything new though. This is a technique that almost every mainline shonen sports series has used for ages. From Blue Lock to Kuroko no Basuke, almost every successful sports manga has converted certain technical aspects of the sport they feature into a fleshed out in-universe power system. Blue Lock is very notable for this, as almost every character in the latter half of the story has a specialty that is basically treated as a superpower. The main character has metavision, which is a fancy way of saying that he can predict the flow of a play. But Dragon and Chameleon still makes this technique special by applying this lens to the world of manga making. Looking at it from the outside, drawing doesn't seem like it would be nearly interesting enough to turn into a shonen series. The only manga that I think comes even close to making art seem this exciting is Blue Period. But even then, the series very much appeals to an older crowd and chooses to focus on the slower, more contemplative aspects of making art. Dragon and Chameleon is truly the first manga I have seen that has found this much action and excitement in something originally so tame. And aside from the technique of dramatization used earlier, the manga also chooses to set the stage of the story in order to make this series as exciting as possible. It's hard to not get excited when reading a story about an acclaimed mangaka fighting his way back to the top of the manga world after being unjustly dethroned. Just by setting up the story in this way, the stakes are set so unbelievably high. It's like the final boss of the game got body swapped with an enemy in the starting town. The odds seem so stacked against Hanagami at every given point, and it makes every triumph and victory feel all the more intense. He goes from being an unpublished nobody to having his first volume completely sell out. And every step along the way is so incredibly satisfying. An impressive thing I noticed about the story of Dragon and Chameleon has to do with the overall flow of the story. When you're pacing out a good narrative, especially in the shonen market, there are a couple key points that are good to hit. You usually want to preview the antagonist early and have the main character suffer some form of defeat to them. This allows you to establish how big of a threat the villain is and how the protagonist is going into this arc as an underdog. This strategy ensures that the villain has a sizable presence in your story, and it allows you to pace out the rest of the arc, with the overall goal being to grow strong enough to beat the antagonist. And Dragon and Chameleon utilizes this practice perfectly. The first plot point after Hanagami switches into Miyama's body is about him working as a small-time assistant on a manga. This allows the audience to get familiar with how talented he is as an artist. But then he encounters his original self at a party and gets torn to shreds when Miyama is able to continue writing Dragonland just as well as Hanagami did. This sets Hanagami down a long path where he has to train and compete with other artists in order to start his own manga, in hopes of eventually dethroning his own creation. By using this tried and true story structure, Dragon and Chameleon injects yet more excitement into the series, and ensures that we remain hooked on Hanagami's journey back to the top. Another technique that Dragon and Chameleon borrows from other shonen series is its use of fictional animal analogs for all of its important characters. As you can tell from the title, Hanagami and Miyama are both frequently represented as a dragon and chameleon respectively. For Miyama, this is pretty intuitive. His whole deal is that he's incredibly good at mimicking other manga artists' styles, which makes him a literal chameleon as he's able to camouflage his art wherever he wants. But this analogy is also used to reveal a lot about Miyama's inner world. In the same way that a chameleon lives its life looking like other things, Miyama frequently has issues with his own identity. We get to see how much he struggles to hold on to his individuality while doing his best to copy someone else's style. One of my favorite moments is when Miyama's chameleon starts to warp and shift into a disturbing version of a dragon, signifying the way Miyama's identity has twisted into a horrifying reflection of Hanagami. And speaking of the dragon, we have to talk about Hanagami himself. At first, it seems like Hanagami is represented as a dragon just because of his flagship series, Dragonland. But we slowly learn that there's more to this analogy than that surface-level connection. Hanagami is an endlessly passionate and driven person. Even if you ignore his immense talent for making manga, his drive to succeed and love for this medium is something that can't really be matched. He thrives in the face of adversity, and he takes every chance he can to challenge himself. This is often connected to his identity as a dragon, since he often says that he will soar above and overcome any adversity he can. On top of the main characters and their symbolic animal selves, there are other important people that have their own personas too. Hanagami's master and friend, for example, is frequently depicted as a Medusa-like figure, whose dreadlocked hair resembles snakes. And Hanagami's first main obstacle once he gets his manga serialized is a wildly successful author named Fugaku, who is commonly depicted as an oni or demon. By using these symbolic connections to animals and fictional creatures, Dragon and Chameleon is once again able to bring an extra layer of excitement to its story. It's not just about the clash between two manga authors, it's a life or death struggle between a dragon and a demon. This type of symbolism is used all the time in sports series too, where characters often have animals that they're associated with or compared to. And this is another technique that Dragon and Chameleon deftly borrows in order to elevate its story. The last thing that I want to touch on is the way that this story uses symbolic artistic terminology in order to highlight certain character moments. And there's this one moment in particular that jumped out to me while reading that I just can't help but talk about. So after Hanagami gets his new manga serialized in a magazine called Weekly Orochi, he ends up hiring a team of 3 assistants to help him get his series out on time. 2 of the assistants he finds are very talented and good at what they do, however they're both fairly inexperienced, especially when compared to Hanagami. They've never felt what it's like to work on a project as intensive as Soaring Blue. But to balance them out, Hanagami hires an old veteran of the industry, who spent years working on some of the highest stress publications out there. The basic workflow that seems to be common in the shonen industry is that the main author will give his assistants certain panels and pages to work on, primarily crowd shots or background work. And then the assistants will run those pages by the author, who will give them corrections as needed on their drawings. After the assistants' pages get finalized, the author's part of the drawing is then overlaid and the panel is complete. During the group's work on the first chapter of Soaring Blue, the 2 younger assistants are starting to get pretty frustrated. They're extremely talented, but because of their lack of experience, they keep on getting corrections on their panels. And instead of taking the feedback in stride and trying to work past them, the pair starts to get pretty down in the dumps. They get one note in particular to fix the halftone dots on an image to prevent them from causing an effect called moire, which is basically a phenomena where two halftone patterns are overlaid, which causes the image to get distorted or blurred. Seeing their distress, Hanagami tells his older assistant to accompany them out on an errand, hoping that he'll help settle their insecurities. While they're walking, the more experienced man tells the other two that they aren't lacking in talent. The piece of the puzzle that they're missing is called anticipation. To make things easier when doing assistant work, you need to start to anticipate the feedback that the author will give you. This way, you can stay ahead of the corrections you get and prevent extra work of going back and forth. After the two assistants learn about this, they realize what they've been missing and resolve to do better. One of them mentions that it feels like there was a moire in their head, preventing them from thinking clearly. And then there's this incredible panel of the two younger assistants breaking out of a moire pattern, with the shards of the haze falling away behind them. This moment is a perfect intersection between the technical details of the series and its symbolic character moments. The way the character's emotional state is represented through the moire effect, and their big emotional breakthrough is represented by them literally shattering the moire, it's just so cool. I don't even know what else to say. This one little moment is such a microcosm of the entire story. Dragon and Chameleon truly uses the medium of art to the highest degree it possibly can. It uses such vivid and rich symbolism in order to highlight certain story beats in a way that makes this manga so unbelievably exciting to read. This is the first series I've seen that has taken the practice of drawing or art and made it into something action-packed and exciting, while still teaching the reader about certain aspects of the manga-making world. If I had one complaint about the series, it would be that the pacing can be a bit too fast at times. The arcs are packed very close together, which can be a little bit disorienting when you're reading through the series all at once. I remember when I first got to the mini tournament arc, I had to reread a chapter or two in order to figure out what was going on. But honestly, I can forgive how fast the pacing is with how much excitement and tension is packed into every corner of the story. There never feels like there's a break between storylines, which can be a bit overwhelming, but I see it as a feature rather than a bug. It really is such an amazing achievement to make a manga like this. Even just zooming out and considering the concept behind the story, Dragon and Chameleon really is something special. Making a battle shonen series about writing shonen series seems like such a no-brainer idea that I'm shocked to see this is the first manga to try it. But regardless, I really can't recommend this manga enough, and I can't believe it's as relatively unpopular as it is. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching.